So Canto 14 opens with a little look back to Canto 13, where Dante has upset the tree. In the beginning of 14, we get this line, "By the love of my native land, I was bestirred to gather up the scattered leaves for him." So he's referring to a different one of those trees who had lost their leaves when the creatures were running through. And so as a gesture of kindness, he scoops those up and puts them back close to the tree. Okay, so in Canto 14, we are looking at those who have committed violence against God, and their punishment here, their contrapasso, is that it is raining fire. It says on page 51, those who wandered were the largest complement, fewer in number were the ones who lay on the ground, but they were loudest in lament. Enormous flakes of fire made their way through the air, falling slowly over the whole expanse, like snow in the mountains on a windless day. So this is a reverse of the usual properties of fire in nature. Actually, when fire burns, you think of the sparks going up, but in this canto, we have the fire raining down, and Dante compares it to snow falling on a mountain. On page 52, we're introduced to one of the characters in this level, Capaneus, and he is showing that he is still sort of against this idea. He's obstinate about the idea of God and still very, very vengeful. So on line 48, page 52, it says, "That very shade immediately said, 'What I was when I was alive, I still am dead.'" So in other words, nothing has changed just because I'm down here. I don't regret what I've done, and I'm still going to be angry. And this is the way that this is down here. These are very wrathful, angry, violent people who have stood up in the face of God. Oh, okay, so on page 53, we have this interesting idea. Virgil is talking to Dante about what's coming up. He says, "Of all the things I've shown you," I'm starting on line 84, "since we crossed the threshold of the wide gate where no one is ever stopped from coming through, not one among those marvels can compare to this stream that has the power to quench the fire that comes raining down upon it through the air." So he's beginning to tell Dante there is a land in the middle of the sea, a wasteland now called Crete, under whose king the world lived virtuously. It has a mountain, Ida, once supplied with plants and water right beneath the sky, deserted now like something cast aside. And then he talks about Rhea, and if you remember from Greek mythology, Rhea is the one who was married to Cronus, and he was the lord of the universe, but it had been foretold to him that one of his sons would one day rise up and overthrow him. So in order to sort of hedge his bets, each time Rhea had a child, he would swallow that child so he could keep them safely inside of him and not have to fear that one would one day take over for him. Well, this went on for a while, and Rhea was not happy about that. She wanted to actually see one of her children grow up. And so the next time she becomes pregnant and gives birth to a child, she tricks Cronus by wrapping up a stone in a baby blanket and spiriting away the baby to be raised in a cave by the nymphs. That ends up to be the god that we know as Zeus, who does in fact overthrow Cronus, and by swallowing that stone that Rhea had given him, causes him to regurgitate all those other babies who had been inside of him, who of course are now grown men because they've been inside, and they join forces with Zeus. But anyway, that's who he's talking about there in that part where it says, "There Rhea hid her son in days gone by, concealed in his safe cradle, and had each priest made a loud clamor when the child would cry." Okay, so he now talks about this mountain where there is a huge man encased, and you can see the illustration here. It says he looks towards Rome as in a looking glass, as in he's looking in a mirror, with his back to Damietta in the east. And the top of page 54, it gives a description. It says his head is made of gold of the finest class, of purest silver are his arms and breast, to where the legs fork he is solid brass, From there he is choice iron, the very best, except for his right foot, which is baked clay. So this little passage comes from a work called the Book of David by Ovid, and these images are there to symbolize certain aspects of humanity. So the precious metals, the gold, the silver, are in reference to the decadence of humanity and how we attach ourselves to things that we shouldn't. And then we have the iron, which for Dante represents the empire, the Holy Roman Empire, because we know that he thinks that that is strong and stable, as opposed to the right foot, which is baked in clay. And for Dante, that represents the papacy, the popes that he believes have corrupted the church. And of course, we know that he would think that because a pope is part of the reason that he has been sent to exile in the first place. So he sees the empire as the iron, strong, and the clay is the papacy, the weak, the easily broken. So from this figure, you can see there are cracks in it. Dante says it's great fissures, and constant tears seep from these cracks. And those tears form rivers. And as you can see from the illustration, as Dante explains here, they form the rivers of hell, the Acheron, the Styx, until ultimately they spill down into a narrow track of Cocytus, which is at the very bottom of hell and is frozen, and that's where we're going to go down and meet Satan. Okay, so we move to Canto 15, where we meet Dante's teacher from Florence, Brunetto Latini. It's possible that he did work with Dante. He is an actual historical figure. We know that he did know Dante. It was possible that he was as a mentor to Dante. And Dante and Virgil are walking along a ledge, and he looks down and thinks, oh my gosh, I think that I recognize someone. And at the bottom of page 55, he says, Sir Brunetto, are you here? Let it not displease you if for a little space Brunetto Latini turns back with you, my son, he said, and lets his band move on apace. With all my heart, I said, let it be done. Or I can sit down if you want. No, he says, I have to keep moving, but I'll follow along at your hymn. So, meaning, since Dante's up on this higher ledge, he's going to follow along and visit with him as he goes. So we find out on page 57 that Dante is heaping praise upon Latini. If I could have the things for which I pray, Dante says, then you would not yet be banished from our humanity this way. He wishes that he weren't here in hell, that he could be back with him in Florence. Forever fixed in poignant memory is the kind, paternal, loving face I knew, when in the world above you instructed me from time to time in what a man must do to become eternal. I must proclaim with pride, for as long as I still live, my debt to you. So he's saying, of course, here that he is very appreciative, that he has taught him so much, and that even still, to this day, Dante uses his teachings. And he goes on to say, I will undergo unafraid whatever fortune may have planned. The prophecy is not new to me, and so let fortune turn her wheel as she sees fit. So Dante is asking here for Brunetto to tell him something about what he knows, about what's to happen in his life. And we're reminded of that image that we talked about a few cantos back about Lady Fortune and her wheel. This isn't that same image that Dante is bringing up to say that he is trusting in the fate and he's ready to hear what's going to happen. So Brunetto basically says that things are going to work out well for him, that he's going to have some problems, but ultimately things are going to be fine. At the end of the canto on page 58, Brunetto, there is more that I could say, but I do not dare speak or stay longer, for I see a new smoke rising from the sand out there. In other words, that's sort of his call that he needs to get back and on pace with the other souls that are down there at his level. He says, people are coming with whom I must not be, but let my treasure, and he's referring there to one of his works, where I still live on, I ask no more, live in your memory. So he's reminding Dante that even though he's no longer on earth, that Dante still has his writings, and that hopefully he will live on in Dante's memory. And Dante ends the canto with, again, warm words towards him. He seemed not to be, speaking about Brunetta, not to be the one who loses, but the one who wins the prize. So he wants to remember Brunetto in this good light, in this happy moment. So we move into Canto 16 on page 58, where it says that in that place to which we had already come, the water falling into the next ring resounded like a beehive's steady hum, when all at once 3 shades came hurrying across the sand. So remember, there's this really, really hot sand with flames falling down, and they're calling out to him, and their faces are all burned, and Dante's not sure that he wants to talk to them. But the teacher, meaning Virgil, attended to their cries and said to Dante, "Here courtesy is due. You must wait and be respectful to these men." So we find out on page 59 that these 3 men are from Florence, and Dante knows them. There is Guido Guerra, Teggio Aldobrandi, and Jacopo Rusticucci. And these are people that Dante says later on in 59, "I am from your land. With what fond sentiments I have always loved to hear and to retell your honored names and high accomplishments." He's heard about these heroic figures since childhood. He looks up to them, and he feels terrible. He says, "Could I have braved the flames without injury, I would have flung myself down from the wall, and I think my guide would not have hindered me." In other words, Virgil would understand. He knows how much these men mean to me, and I'm sorry to see that they are down here in this level of hell. It would be the equivalent of if you had come across George Washington or Martin Luther King Jr. or people that we would look up to in this world, only to find out that they had been sent to hell. It would shock us. And that's how Dante's feeling here. He's surprised to see them here. And I guess it's one of those ways of saying to us that the way we understand people in this world is not necessarily, we don't understand everything, that sometimes God sees things that we don't see. So at the end of this canto, you see that they're on this edge here, and they've got to get down to the next level, but they've got to find a way to do that. So Virgil asks Dante to take off, top of page 61, he asks him for a cord, which then he throws over the side. And all of a sudden, we see this. Something is coming up over the edge of the precipice. So Canto 17 opens with yet another creature that would have been recognizable, Geryon. Virgil says, "Behold the beast with the pointed tail, who can pass over the mountains, who breaks walls and weaponry, who makes the world a festering morass." And Dante looks up, and he gets a long description of the beast on page 62, and you can see from the image here that he has the face of a man, and he has wings and this long tail that has like a scorpion's point on the end. So at this point, Virgil does something unusual. He sends Dante away and says, "Why don't you go and talk to those people over there, and I'm going to go and talk to this monster." And in fact, what he's going to try to do is to convince Geryon to take them down on his back to the next level. And when Dante comes back, he's convinced Geryon, and he says on page 64, "Now, I'm going to get in front, I'm going to sit in the back, you get in front, so that in case something happens, the tail won't be able to hurt you." And Dante, of course, is very afraid, because this is a scary monster, and he's also, it seems, a little bit afraid of flying on this monster, and so he's pretty much clutching on for dear life. But Virgil assures him that it's going to be just fine. And in fact, he's talking to the beast all the way down about, "Please don't forget that we're back here, make wide circles, come in for a soft landing." And sure enough, by the end of the canto, they can see that he is going to touch to the ground, and as soon as they dismount, then he shoots off, and it says on page 65, he was gone, vanishing like an arrow from the bow.